So remembering the last, I don't know if it was months or what, but last times in when we were in Canada toward the end, I remember um, living in this house, and it was by another one of those schools that I used to escape from when I used to just run off and run down the road and go home and stuff like that. And uh, we played marbles back then, and we dig a little hole in the dirt in the sidewalk and stuff like that, and flip marbles and played keepsies or losies, whatever it was. And keepsies meant that you lost all your marbles. If you lost the game, people would take your marbles. And there was these native kids that lived across the way. They used to come and they would steal anything that I possibly had. I would have any toy, ball, whatever it was. But I figured I'd throw down with these guys and play some marbles. And so we're playing, and we weren't playing for keepsies, but they kept my marbles. And I remember like trying to fight for these marbles, and that was the first time I was getting knocked about and stuff like that. And so I, for some reason, like that day, I went and I pulled this branch off of a tree, and I stuck it into the yard, and I was determined that this branch was going to turn into a tree. And now these other neighbor kids saw that I had planted this branch, that this branch like meant something to me or something. And so they began to throw rocks across the fence, and I defended this stick with everything I had. I was taking these rocks to my chest. There was just this little dude, and I was like letting the rocks hit me, and I was like protecting this stick and everything like that. And the old man comes home the next day and pulls the stick out of the yard and just breaks it in half, right? It throws it over, and I cried about it. And man, he let me freaking have it. You know, I was like, oh, my tree. That was my tree. It was not a tree, it's a stick kind of thing. So, but I remember that house, the one reprieve. Well, my brother was there. He was a baby. And I was already a little bit jealous of this kid because, you know, he wasn't getting hit. And so his crib, I remember, we were on the second floor. That was where his room was. And I would get out of bed and I would pull the bottle out of his mouth while he was sleeping, and I would throw it out this two-story window. And like he's a newborn baby, right? And I would run down and I would report it. And I'd be like, he threw his bottle out the window. He threw his bottle out the window because I wanted something to happen to this baby because I was tired of taking the brunt of it. I was just over I was like done because everything I did, you know? There was just you know what else was a really great reprieve was that we did have Sesame Street. So my introduction to the Sesame Street characters was probably the most fulfilling part of that piece of my childhood was come and play Sesame Street, you know, or like tra la 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 la, sing a song, sing out loud. It was the best. And I remember there was this lady that lived in another apartment, and the only thing I can remember her were her really fat legs, and I would sit there and look down at these huge thighs, and she was French Canadian, so she spoke French, no English. And I remember where her toilet was in the house, you had to sit sideways on the toilet, and that just like for some reason I was fixated on the way the toilet was. But she'd watch Bugs Bunny with me, so I'd watch Bugs Bunny with her. I'd see some Sesame Street, and then I would follow kids home during lunch again, you know, like or after school, and I'd invite myself, and that was the first time I had peanut butter and banana sandwiches. Stuff like that kind of sticks with me for that. But I remember this one day where I was walking down, and I used to just make myself friends wherever I went. Like I would just go and be with adults because I would get something from adults, you know. Sometimes I get to play the drums in a band, or you know, I'd end up at some, I don't know, amusement park or something like that with complete strangers that I just would tag along with all the time, stuff like that. So I remember there was this group of bikers down the road, and they had like the eagles tattooed on their heads. They were real rough and tumble, and I just walked right into that yard. They were having a keg party, and I knew how to work a keg at that age. And so I was pumping the keg, and there was a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I'd sneak bourbon into their drinks and give it to them, and they'd drink it. No, this is a Boilermaker, and they'd pat me on the back. And again, I was getting that status of like, you know, like the more I did, you know, the harder it was for this little kid, you know, like, oh, he's a badass little kid kind of thing. And I remember being in that yard, and those guys were telling me how I couldn't hang out. You couldn't be in this yard. You can't be here with us. And it was just full of bikes. And I was up on this porch. And so my old man comes walking down the street, and I'm like, man, here he comes. And I'm like kind of getting shaky and stuff. And he walks up, and he goes to step into the yard, and I watch him double take it, and he like backs away, and he just walks down the road. He doesn't even acknowledge that I'm there, and the whole yard full of bikers had just started calling him out, calling him names, and all that. Look at him, look how scared he is, da, da, da. And I was in such celebration. I was like, I was part of this posse of bikers, you know, still about 4, maybe 5 years old. And I was like, we scared him. Like, finally, this guy is scared. And it was like, I felt so, so empowered that day. I remember that.